World of Warcraft isn't a carefully constructed narrative. It's a living document of 2 decades of game development philosophy changes, writer room drama, and corporate pressure to create content regardless of whether it makes sense. And that accidental authenticity, that refusal to care about continuity when there's raids to ship, is what makes it compelling. So let's talk about every expansion. What worked, what failed, what got retconned, what got abandoned, and why the most broken lore in gaming might also be the most brilliant. We start where everyone starts, classic World of Warcraft, the expansion that had no story, and that's exactly why it's still the best. The accidental masterpiece. Classic World of Warcraft had no central story, just scattered raid bosses with loose connections. And that's exactly why it worked better than every expansion that followed. Here's what nobody talks about. Classic launched in 2004 with zero overarching narrative, Ragnaros the Fire Lord in Molten Core because Dark Iron Dwarves accidentally summoned him centuries ago. Onyxia disguised as Lady Katrana Prestor manipulating Stormwind. Nefarian in Blackwing Lair creating chromatic dragons. Sithon is imprisoned behind the Scarab Wall. Kel'Thuzad commanding Scourge from floating Naxxramas. None of them work together. None of them are part of a bigger plan. They just existed and the players loved it. Travel to Blackrock Mountain. You'll find 2 dragon threats who barely acknowledge each other. Head to Silithus and Seathun stirring independently of any surface conflict. Journey to Stratholme and the Scourge operate separate from old god schemes. These weren't connected by grand design. The game never claimed they were. Seathun wasn't working with Ragnaros. Nefarian wasn't allied with Kel'Thuzad. Just multiple catastrophes happening simultaneously. But here's where it gets interesting. Players started finding connections Blizzard never stated. Onyxia's kidnapping of Varian Rin destabilizes Stormwind while Scourge threatens from the north and dragons from Blackrock. The Scarab Wall was built by Night Elves and Bronze Dragonflight together, implying cooperation the game never elaborates on. Hakar, the Soul Flayer, gets help from Zandalari trolls who are presented as a noble tribe saving corrupted kin. Cool, except later expansions make Zandalari antagonists with zero explanation. What about threats Classic just dropped? Ragnaros was banished after Molten Core. Where'd he go? Back to Firelands? Can he return? The game doesn't say. Sithon supposedly died in the Temple of Ahn'Qiraj, but later lore establishes old gods can't truly die, so did we kill him or not? Kel'Thuzad's phylactery was never destroyed. Some greedy adventurer grabbed it as loot, which means he could return anytime, and he does in Wrath when Naxxramas moves to Northrend. Nobody planned that in Classic. It just happened. Players spent years theorizing. Maybe old gods manipulated surface threats, maybe Deathwing's children prepared for his return, maybe Scourge and Legion were connected. Some theories were right, some are wrong. But Blizzard never told us which. The mystery was world building. Here's the discovery nobody expected. Classic's lack of central narrative created better environmental storytelling than planned expansions. You didn't need a quest text explaining Ragnaros. His influence showed across Searing Gorge, Burning Steppes, Ungoro Crater. Onyxia's deception was discoverable through breadcrumb quests, making you feel like an investigator. The Scourge invasion pre-event let threat come to you rather than forcing you to chase it. And Classic treated every threat as equally important. Sithon wasn't bigger bad than Ragnaros. Nefarian wasn't mid-tier compared to Kel'Thuzad. All were existential threats to different Azeroth regions. No hierarchy, no real villain marketing. Multiple problems, limited resources, prioritization. That's how real worlds work. Compare that to every expansion after. One big bad. One central narrative, one explanation connecting every zone to the main villain. It's tidier, more focused, and completely undermines the living world with independent threats. Classic accidentally proved scattered, mysterious storytelling creates better immersion than carefully plotted arcs. Because Classic wasn't trying to tell you a story, it was showing you a world. Yeah, this isn't deep lore. This is Blizzard stumbling into good world building by not having enough writers for overarching narrative. They built raids based on what's cool to fight, not what serves the story. The lack of connection wasn't a flaw, it was liberation from justifying everything as a grand plan. That's why even 20 years later, Classic fans argue it had a better story than modern expansions, not because the narrative was tighter, because it didn't have a narrative. And in the narrative's absence, players built their own. Classic's story exists in spaces between what Blizzard stated, and those spaces are infinite, but Blizzard couldn't leave well enough alone. They saw players enjoying scattered mysteries and thought, what if we gave them one big villain? Enter the Burning Crusade. Congratulations, we're killing Illidan Stormrage. Whether that's good news depends on which expansion you ask. Burning Crusade, killing the wrong villain. The Burning Crusade turned Warcraft 3's most complex character into a raid bot, and after 15 years, Blizzard's still trying to explain why we killed the guy who was actually fighting the Legion the entire time. Here's what you need to know. Warcraft 3. The Frozen Throne ends with Illidan fleeing to Outland, the shattered remains of Draenor, to hide from Kil'jaeden's wrath. He'd failed to destroy the Lich King, and now the Legion wanted him dead, so he conquered Outland, claimed the Black Temple, and started preparing defenses. That's where Warcraft 3 leaves him, desperate anti-hero fortifying against cosmic demons. Cool. But then Burning Crusade launches, and Illidan's the villain. Not misunderstood antagonist, just a villain. The Naru tells you he's a tyrant who must be stopped. You kill Lady Vash in the Serpent Shrine Cavern, you kill Kael'thas Sunstrider in Tempest Keep, you storm Black Temple and execute the Betrayer. The game presents this as heroic, except none of it makes sense. Travel to Zangar Marsh. Lady Vash is draining all the water using massive pumping stations. So why? The game never explains. Quest text says she's stealing water, but not what for. Players speculated she was creating a new Well of Eternity. Never confirmed. You kill her without ever learning her actual plan. Head to Netherstorm. Kael'thas has taken Tempest Keep, and he's draining magic from the Twisting Nether. But wait, his entire motivation in Warcraft 3 was saving Blood Elves from magic addiction. Why is he now serving Kil'jaeden, the same legion that destroyed the Sunwell and caused his people suffering? Zero explanation. He just switched sides between games. And here's where it gets worse. Illidan's demon hunters, Night Elves and Blood Elves who gouged out their own eyes to see the Legion's true nature, are throughout Black Temple, and you kill them. All of them. Because Adal said Illidan's evil, so obviously his followers are too. 12 years later in Legion, Blizzard makes demon hunters a playable class and reveals they were heroes fighting the Legion from within. Whoops. Players question this throughout Burning Crusade. Why are we killing Illidan? Was a constant forum topic. If you read the quest text carefully, hints appear that something's off. Akama is described as seeking vengeance, not justice. His people were transformed into broken, and he blames Illidan. That's a personal grudge. Maya of Shadowsong admits she's obsessed with capturing Illidan. Her entire identity was built around imprisoning him for 10,000 years. When he's defeated, her storyline just ends. So we killed Illidan because a grudge-driven Draenei and obsessed Warden manipulated us, and the Naru backed them. Why? The game never explains what Illidan actually did wrong. Conquered Outland from Magtheridon, a pit lord enslaving the native population, trained demon hunters to fight demons, took Black Temple as a defensible fortress. Data miners found unused voice lines where Illidan explains his plans directly, mentions preparing for Legion's return, references strategies against Kil'jaeden, all removed. Can't have the raid boss give a sympathetic speech before you kill him. Better keep him mysterious and villainous so the loot feels earned. Chris Metzen admitted years later that killing Illidan was a mistake. Legion expansion, 9 years after BC, was built around bringing him back and fixing his narrative. An entire expansion to retcon Burning Crusade's character assassination. Legion revealed Illidan was fighting the Legion the whole time. Lady Vash wasn't stealing water for conquest. Securing resources for siege. Kael'thas betraying him wasn't planned. Actual betrayal weakening his defenses. Demon hunters we killed were loyal warriors we murdered because we didn't understand. And Illidan's plan to invade Argus and kill Sargeras, that's exactly what we do in Legion, using his strategy. So Burning Crusade's narrative was wrong. We were the villains. We destroyed Azeroth's best defense against the Legion because Naru, with unclear motivations, said Illidan was bad, and Blizzard knew it immediately based on player feedback, but didn't fix it for 9 years. This isn't mysterious storytelling. This is Blizzard needing raid content and picking fan favorite character without considering implications. They wanted an iconic villain for marketing. Illidan was iconic, therefore villain. The fact this contradicted Warcraft 3, not important when selling expansion boxes. What this established, Blizzard will sacrifice character arcs for convenient raid bosses. Pattern repeats with Garrosh, Kael'thas, Sylvanas. When writers change, character development gets abandoned for boss fight convenience. But if butchering Illidan seems bad, wait until Wrath of the Lich King. Arthas spent an entire expansion on his throne doing nothing while you killed his army, and somehow that's not even the the weird part, Wrath. The passive apocalypse Wrath of the Lich King is either the greatest villain story in WoW history or the biggest plot hole in gaming. Arthas had multiple opportunities to kill every hero on Azeroth. Instead, he watched you murder his entire army and waited at the top of his citadel. Here's the setup. Warcraft 3 ends with Arthas merging with Ner'zhul to become the Lich King. He controls millions of undead. He has Frostmourne, a soul-stealing rune blade. He has necromantic powers to raise anyone he kills. He's basically a god. His goal, scour all life from Azeroth and raise everyone as undead. So naturally, he sits at Icecrown doing nothing for 2 years while you level up. Travel to Northrend when Wrath launches. You're level 70. Arthas is at Icecrown Citadel. He can teleport, does it multiple times during expansion. He could send his strongest lieutenants immediately. He could overwhelm starting zones with undead armies, but he doesn't. He lets you establish bases, kill his minions, and slowly work north. Then the Wrathgate happens. Grand Apothecary Putris unleashes a plague-killing Alliance, Horde, and Scourge forces. Putris and Varimathras stage a coup, take Undercity, declare independence from the Lich King. This should be a massive crisis. A plague just wiped out significant Scourge forces. Arthas does nothing. Thrall and Varian deal with it. The Lich King, master of all undead, just watches. But here's where it gets weirder. Yogg-Saron, an old god imprisoned in Ulduar, is trying to break free. Same old god who whispered to Ner'zhul when the Lich King was created. They have history. Does Arthas help Yogg-Saron escape? No. Say, he sits at Icecrown while adventurers storm Ulduar and defeat an old god. If they work together, Azeroth falls in days. Instead, they ignore each other. Patch 3.2 brings Trial of the Crusader. Argent Crusade holds a tournament to identify strongest champions for eventual Icecrown assault. Arthas knows about this. He attacks the tournament personally, kills Tyrion's messenger, raises a Frostworm, murders faction leaders, then leaves, just flies away, doesn't finish the job, doesn't destroy the Colosseum, makes his point, and leaves, letting the tournament continue. Why? What was the point? If you know about the army being built to kill you, stop it, kill everyone there. But no, he lets them continue preparations. Here's the official explanation from Icecrown Citadel. Arthas was deliberately letting champions grow stronger so he could raise them as his ultimate undead army. Every boss we killed proved we're the strongest warriors. Once we reached him, he'd kill us and raise us as perfect champions. Let's interrogate that logic. If Arthas wanted strong undead warriors, why let us kill his existing champions first? We killed Kel'Thuzad, his most trusted lieutenant. Blood Princes, Professor Putricide, Blood Queen Lanathel. Every boss we defeated was already powerful, already loyal. Why let us destroy them to test if we're worthy? It's like burning your army to see if the enemy deserves recruitment. Strategically insane. And in the final fight, Arthas defeats us completely, kills the entire raid, monologues about raising us as Scourge champions. Then Tyrion breaks free from ice, shatters Frostmourne with Ashbringer. Arthas dies. Bolvar becomes the new Lich King because there must always be a Lich King. Wait, why? Who decided that? The Lich King isn't a natural force. Legion created him as a weapon. Why does destroying the weapon require a replacement? Can't we just destroy the Scourge? These questions are too complicated, so instead, there must always be a Lich King becomes the rule. Bolvar volunteers. Problem solved until Shadowlands retcons this 11 years later. Why did Arthas behave this way? 3 theories. 1. Blizzard needed raid content. Real answer. Couldn't have Arthas actively threatening cities throughout expansion. Easier to park him at Icecrown until the final raid. 2. Arthas subconsciously sabotaged himself. The last remnant of the human prince wanted to be stopped. 0 evidence in game. 3. Yogg-Saron secretly controlled him. Old God whispered during creation, maybe influenced him still. More evidence, but never confirmed. What we know, Arthas in Wrath contradicts Warcraft 3 Arthas. In Warcraft 3, he was ruthlessly pragmatic. Cold Stratholme, extreme but logical. Burned ships to prevent retreat, brutal but effective. Every action was victory at any cost. Immediately in Wrath, passive villain who monologues from a distance. That's not Arthas. That's raid boss behavior. Despite logical holes, Wrath is remembered as one of the best expansions because Arthas is compelling even when behavior makes no sense. Because Icecrown Citadel was incredible. Blizzard stumbled into good expansion despite plot holes. What this established, villains must survive until the final raid even if illogical. Pattern repeats every expansion. Game mechanics override narrative logic, and if you think passive villains are bad storytelling, wait until you meet Deathwing and Garrosh. 2 expansions that proved Blizzard's formula was completely broken. Cataclysm and Mists. The pattern emerges. 2 expansions proved Blizzard's formula was broken. One gave us a world destroyer who mostly just hovered. The other repeated Wrath's mistakes but somehow made them slower and more frustrating. Cataclysm's opening is incredible. Deathwing. Corrupted dragon aspect suspect who'd been hiding for millennia breaks free from his prison, shatters continents, changes geography permanently, zones are destroyed. The world literally breaks in half. This is the apocalypse. This is the end of everything. Then Deathwing spends the next 2 years occasionally flying over zones to one-shot random players. That's his master plan. Here's what doesn't make sense. Deathwing at his weakest. Post-Second War, badly wounded, still corrupted Alexstrasza and created Fel Orcs. Deathwing at his strongest, freshly empowered by N'Zoth, just flies around. He appears in maybe 3 quest chains during leveling. Croft, you fight him briefly in Deepholm where he escapes, then nothing until Dragon Soul Raid. For expansion's main villain, remarkably absent. The official explanation is he was regaining strength and enacting Old God's plan across multiple zones. But what's the plan? Break the world. Okay, done. Now what? Like, he accomplished his opening move, then hid until we were strong enough to kill him. Same pattern as Arthas. The villain does dramatic things, then waits passively for the final raid. And the ending? We time travel to War of the Ancients to steal the Dragon Soul, an artifact Deathwing created, bring it to present, use it against him. Dragon aspects sacrifice their power to kill him permanently. Age of Mortals begins, aspects lose immortality. Why does this work? Because we needed an ending and time travel solves everything. Don't question the paradoxes. Then comes Mists of Pandaria. Garrosh Hellscream drops a mana bomb on Theramore, starts faction war, discover Pandaria, finds Y'Sharge's heart, an old god heart, and uses it as a weapon, corrupts Veil of Eternal Blossoms. Vol'jin leads a rebellion. They capture Garrosh in the siege of Orgrimmar. Here's where it gets stupid. Instead of executing a war criminal who committed genocide, they hold a trial. War Crimes novel proves Garrosh wasn't corrupted. Unlike Arthas or Deathwing, every action was his own choice. He's fully responsible, deserves death, but they keep him alive because reasons. Then Kairos Dormu and Raytheon break him out, sending him to alternate timeline Draenor, setting up Warlords of Draenor. The trial is Blizzard trying to make Garrosh complex. He wasn't corrupted, so he's a more interesting villain. Except, it satisfies nobody. Players who wanted him dead are frustrated. Players who wanted a nuanced Horde story are frustrated by the Horde is evil again narrative, and the escape makes the entire trial pointless anyway. Community frustration was massive. Morally Gray became a meme after developers said Teldrassil burning would be morally gray. Horde players are forced into villain roles again after being villains in Wrath. Alliance players frustrated their victory rings hollow. Both factions are upset about quality. What these expansions proved, escalating stakes make threats feel smaller. Deathwing breaking the world should be bigger than Arthas threatening one continent, but because world breaking happens in the opening cinematic then gets ignored, it feels less important than Wrath's slower build. Garrosh using the old god heart should be terrifying. Instead, it's the background for the rebellion storyline everyone saw coming. The pattern is now undeniable. The big villain does dramatic things early, hides, or becomes passive. Players kill lieutenants for multiple patches. The final raid confronts the villain, either they die or escape for the sequel hook. Repeat every expansion. Cataclysm and Mist didn't break the pattern, they exposed it, made it obvious, made players realize every expansion follows the same structure regardless of whether it makes sense. And Blizzard's solution? Introduce time travel and alternate universes. Surely that won't create massive problems. Surely abandoning half an expansion's content will go over well with players. Welcome to Warlords of Draenor, where nothing matters and the plot threads get abandoned. Warlords and Legend. Time travel fixes nothing. Blizzard introduced alternate timelines and immediately abandoned them. Then they fixed Burning Crusade's mistakes while stabbing the planet with a giant sword. Both things are treated with equal narrative importance. Warlords of Draenor is where things get really messy. Garrosh escapes to an alternate timeline Draenor set 35 years in the past. He shows Grommash Hellscream a vision of the true timeline where orcs drink demon blood and become slaves. Grommash refuses. We will never be slaves. The Iron Horde is born. Uncorrupted orcs with advanced technology invading Azeroth. We push them back, follow through the Dark Portal, and dismantle their operation. Here's the problem. This is an alternate timeline, different universe. So why do these characters act exactly like main timeline versions despite completely different life experiences? Alternate Gul'dan has the same motivations. Alternate Grommash acts identical to Warcraft 3 Grommash, even though he never drank demon blood, never invaded Azeroth, never fought alongside humans. They're supposed to be different people. They're not. And the content drought. Data miners found massive amounts of cut content. Entire Shatrath raid, Farallon zone, capital cities for both factions, Ogre continent, Grommash redemption arc, all removed. 14-month gap between final raid and Legion pre-patch. Blizzard admitted they restarted development midway, pulled the team to work on Legion Legion early warlords was abandoned. What happened to alternate universe characters? AU Ural becomes Lightbound Fanatic in BFA Maghar recruitment scenario, wasn't mentioned for 2 years. AU Grommash helps defeat Legion, then stays on AU Draenor, never seen again. AU Timeline sealed off, conveniently explaining why we never go back. Time travel created problems Blizzard solved by ignoring them, then Legion does something unprecedented. It admits Burning Crusade was wrong about Illidan and actually makes it work. We resurrect Illidan. He joins us against Legion. We learn he was fighting demons all along. Players were right to question BC's narrative. 12-year-old plot hole gets fixed through expansion built around bringing him back. Legion also has the longest development time of any expansion, class order halls, artifact weapons, Suramar storyline, Argus as final zone, everything's polished, the story's coherent. Illidan's characterization makes sense, and it ends by having us defeat the Burning Legion, the cosmic threat that's been WoW's ultimate villain since Warcraft 3, permanently. We kill Argus, Pantheon imprisons Sargeras. As the final act, Sargeras stabs Azeroth with his sword. That sword is still there, just sticking out of Silithus, bleeding Azerite everywhere. This is presented as an equally important plot point, as we defeated the Burning Legion forever. A sword in the desert gets the same narrative weight as ending cosmic war that's defined Warcraft for 15 years. Here's the question nobody asks. If Sargeras can just stab planets, why didn't he do that 10,000 years ago during the War of the Ancients? Why build a portal at all? Just stab the world. Boom. Dead Titan spirit. Answer: because Blizzard needed a visual hook for the next expansion. Logic doesn't matter when you need Battle for Azeroth setup. What Legion proved, when given development time, Blizzard can create compelling narratives that fix past mistakes. But success creates new problems. We just defeated a cosmic level threat. Every future villain needs to be bigger. Where do you escalate to after saving the universe from demons? Blizzard's answer, faction war. Again, over magical blood. Because if there's one thing WoW needs after defeating the Burning Legion, it's Horde versus Alliance for the 5th time. Battle for Azeroth, the expansion that hated players. Battle for Azeroth asked, what if we did Mists of Pandaria again, but worse? Sylvanas burned Teldrassil, killing thousands of Night Elves. The Horde rebelled again, and after 2 years, Blizzard still can't explain what Sylvanas' actual plan was. Here's the setup. Sargeras' sword wound bleeds Azerite, magical blood of the planet. Powerful new resources cause faction conflict. Sylvanas leads Horde to conquer Darkshore and capture Teldrassil as hostage, except she doesn't capture it. She burns it, commits genocide. Why? To break their hope? What does that mean? The game never explains clearly. The Teldrassil burning makes no strategic sense. Sylvanas wanted the tree as leverage against Alliance retaliation. Then Saurfang criticizes her methods, so she burns it anyway out of spite. This doesn't achieve military objectives, just makes Alliance hate Horde more and sets up another evil Horde storyline players already endured and miss. But here's where it gets worse. Everyone knows Saurfang will rebel. It's telegraphed from patch 8.0, takes the entire expansion to actually happen. 2 years of watching inevitable rebellion play out in slow motion. When it finally occurs, it feels anticlimactic. Saurfang challenges Sylvanas to Mak'gora. She kills him, yells, "The Horde is nothing," abandons faction, flies to Icecrown to shatter Helm of Domination. That's the setup for Shadowlands, and N'Zoth, most powerful old god, hyped since Cataclysm, created Deathwing, corrupted Queen Ashara, whispered to heroes since Classic, 15 years of buildup, defeated in a single patch. Patch 8.3, 1 raid tier, gone. Players were outraged. This is the old god who nearly destroyed the world through Deathwing, dies in 10 minutes. Compare N'Zoth, cosmic horror entity, easier to kill than Garrosh, orc with anger issues. That's not power scaling. That's Blizzard needing to wrap up BFA quickly to get to Shadowlands. Community backlash was enormous. Morally gray became the biggest meme. Developers said Teldrassil would be a morally gray decision. Genocide isn't morally gray. Horde players are forced into villain roles for the 3rd time. Alliance players' frustrated victory feels hollow. Both factions are upset about story quality, and Azshara, 10,000-year-old queen, recurring villain, gets a single raid in Nazjatar, doesn't even die, gets imprisoned by N'Zoth. Then N'Zoth dies in the next patch, so Ashara's imprisonment is meaningless. Wasted potential everywhere. What about Sylvanas' motivation? Game reveals she's been working with the Jailer, Shadowlands villain since her suicide at End of Wrath, sending souls to the Maw to empower him. But BFA quest text shows her motivations being about forsaken survival, not cosmic death schemes. It's a retcon. Blizzard decided mid-BFA to connect her to Shadowlands, contradicting everything they'd written about her motivations for 3 expansions. Developer context matters here. Multiple writers left Blizzard during BFA development. Ion Hazakostas, game director, not trained writer, made final narrative calls, shows what BFA proved. You can't repeat Mist's formula and expect the same results. Also established that cosmic horror, old gods, can be defeated more easily than faction leaders with daddy issues. Power scaling has no meaning. Villains die when convenient for expansion schedules, not when narratively appropriate. But if wasting in Zoth seems bad, wait until Shadowlands. 2 years building up the Jailer as the mastermind behind everything, and after defeating him, nobody knows what he wanted. If you enjoyed this deep dive into WoW's expansions and want to see World of Warcraft's worst races explained, check out the next video.